Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming today for Jeanne Marie Martineau's artist talk. Jeanne Marie was incredible to have as a resident here at the BJC, um, and I'm sure we're all very excited to hear her talk about what she's made during her residency. Um, Jeanne Marie Martineau is a French American transdisciplinary artist and facilitator who weaves various mediums of object making, writing, dream tending, song, and sound meditation into a unified peace practice and experiences of community care and artistic self discovery. Her practice is informed by depth psychology, ancient spiritualities, wisdom traditions, and esoteric practices across the world. Her work has been showcased in the 2023 So Fresh and So Clean Ethical Metalsmith student exhibition, as well as the Baltimore Jewelry Center's recent community making show, This Must Be the Place. Jeanne Marie is also a 2023 recipient of the Maryland State Arts Council Professional Development Opportunity Grant and of the Baltimore Office of Promotion and the Arts Office of the Mayor Individual Artist Award from the Creative Baltimore Fund. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeanne Marie
All
um,
right.
to hear what she's been doing.
Thank you, Jay. Um, I'm really excited to have everyone. And I want to start first by personally thanking the Baltimore Jewelry Center and everyone who helps fund their work. The BJC is a truly special place, and it's an art community, and my life is forever changed by this experience. I want to thank you to the team members and the teachers, Shane, Allison, Elliot, Jen, Andy, Molly, Mercury, Jay, Adam, Shayna, Everett, and Katya. And this work today is, it also required some additional funding, and it was made possible with two generous grants. I received a grant from the Creative Baltimore Fund, which is a grant program funded by Mayor Brandon Scott's office in the city of Baltimore. And I received the Maryland State Art Council's professional development grant. So thank you to Mayor Scott's office and the Maryland State Arts Council for your support. It's been really meaningful to receive this kind of support for my work directly from Baltimore City and Maryland State. Additionally, I want to thank numerous friends and family who also generously contributed funds to my work. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to share what you helped create. And lastly, I want to thank and name my many teachers and inspirations along this portion of my path. This list is not exhaustive, but I wanted to do it, and it's in partially chronological order. So thank you to Jonathan Stancato, Ani Williams, Sonia Kreitzler, Andrea Renee Johnson, Dave Hawkins and Precious Plastics, the brothers Make, Gary Dusek, Joey Bruno, the Dr. Stephen Eisenstadt, Jeanette Keynes and everyone at Jewelry Arts, Andy Lowry, Françoise Lan, Allison Strickland, P. the Fury, Savannah King, Jackie Cantwell, Shayna Croys, Joyce J. Scott, Erica Bridgeford, Dr. Lawrence Brown, Jill Purse, and Everett Hoffman. And thanks to everyone here and everyone everywhere who has supported me in any way. And thank you for coming today. All right. So my slides are a bit sticky here. There we go. So my residency project is really all about how I crafted a life and home for myself here while reincarnating bags and plastic that I've collected from the Baltimore streets and connecting with my surrounding community. This project is about Baltimore, it's about peace and crafting a harmonious life. I've learned so much during this experience about success and failure, my patterns, how I like to work, how I do work, and how my life is the work and how I'm sculpting each facet at all times. Some of you know parts of this story. There's really a lot to this story, more than we have time for today. I mean, I did a lot of research and I have many sources, and a lot of them are still untapped. And I even started a Substack called the Residency Diaries with entries that expanded into essays. And writing has become instrumental in my process. I have thousands of words and pages of unpublished entries. So just so you know, this isn't the whole story. But here's the basic background scoop. In October of 2021, I moved to Baltimore after quitting my job as a diamond sales associate at Cartier Mansion in New York City. The original plan was to move to Bali and make art, but I fell in love with someone who lives in Baltimore and I came here. And it was here, the month I moved, that I made my first gem out of recycled plastic waste. And it was in Station North, an arts and entertainment district, that I found both a studio right here at the Graffiti Warehouse and the Baltimore Jewelry Center. And I started to develop my own plastic gem making process. And I learned how to set those gems in metal thanks to folks at Jewelry Arts, but in particular, thanks to the Baltimore Jewelry Center, where I took maybe 6 or 7 classes with Andy. And I continued to experiment with the gems themselves, developing a mold making technique to create shiny cabochon surfaces, and learning from goldsmith Savannah King as to how to set them in gold. And all of these gems were made from these pieces of plastic waste. And as this was all developing, my relationship ended, but my romance with Baltimore continued. And so from my parents' house in California, where I moved temporarily, I applied for the Baltimore Jewelry Center's Emerging Artist Residency as a love letter and a thank you to the city of Baltimore for opening itself up to me. I wanted to collect plastic from the city itself as an act of care. I plan to make gems from plastic waste exclusively picked up off the streets and track and map the geography of each piece of rescued plastic, noting the history and ecology of the environment it was taken from. And I wanted to explore some questions. Some of these questions were, how can my art and jewelry making contribute to the beautification of my host city? How can jewelry making engage members of the community? How can my jewelry tell their city and the materials story? And how will my work evolve with community-specific inquiry, particularly that's invested into the Station North neighborhood and its DIY community art and makerspaces? So what follows is a series of experiments in light, sound, and time and space. And the project ended up taking on 2 directions from which many ideas spiraled. One was inward facing, where I explored my relationship to my new home and my life in Baltimore through dream images and the fractal spiral. And the other, outward facing, was exploring the link between Baltimore's best known nickname, Charm City, its complex social and ecological history, and the history of magical jewelry and song. I created many objects in my time here through a variety of experiments. Most things are not finished. Finishing in the jewelry world refers to surface finishes. It's really the last step in making. But they're all perfect, not as in flawless, but as in complete. The Latin root of perfect means complete. So while my objects are not finished and certainly not flawless, they are perfect because each experiment is complete. Okay, a quick note on materials. So these are local to Maryland fossils left behind by Carboniferous period organisms 2 to maybe 300 million years ago. And after hundreds of millions of years of heat and pressure, fossils like these can turn to oil. The oil is extracted and it's processed multiple times to get it to this state: high density and low density polyethylene, HDPE2 and LDPE4, film plastic, aka bags, and mostly single-use packaging. This is the most commonly produced and least recycled type of plastic, and this is the type that I use. It's really wild to me to think that long ago a snail died on the ocean floor, and maybe what was once its shell is now aimlessly floating down the streets after being used once to hold a donut from 7-Eleven. How did what was once organic become forever cursed to hold our stuff for us? It's kind of twisted, but surely a material made from ancestral organisms can't be evil. But not all polyethylene moves aimlessly. Sometimes I'd run into flirty plastic bags that wanted to have a little more fun. They'd tease me into and across streets and allow me to become completely mesmerized, rewarding not the chase, but patience and stillness, and sometimes coming straight to me after having tested my loyalty. The most ancient dream wisdoms know that everything is always dreaming: people, trees, cities. So, of course, an ancient marine ancestor that's been treated as cheap trash might dream of being reincarnated as the most precious human object, jewelry. Dream tending knows that all images are alive, and the intolerable image, what appears to be a monster, transforms not from obliteration, but through presence and acceptance. So people call this figure Frankenstein, but this is actually Dr. Frankenstein's creature, it's his creation. And the fact that we've conflated the monster with the name of its creator kind of reminds me of how many people feel about plastic. But I kind of ask, what's more upsetting, the material or the unchecked destruction caused by its creator? And caring for the discarded and demonized is one of the reasons I've loved setting my plastic gems in gold. A line of inquiry I was following is, if everything in my relationship is relational, then how I treat something is reflected back to me and how I experience that thing. So how might my relationship to something change if I change how I treat it? So I've loved learning ancient and classical goldsmithing techniques from Savannah King, combining them with new plastic treatment techniques. And I feel like there's something so electric about pairing the world's most valued natural material, gold, with humanity's most despised human-made waste, plastic. In this project, in terms of metal use, I was using mostly brass, silver, and steel, fabricated objects in brass and silver, and and bronze as well, and casting objects mostly in bronze. Baltimore has quite a history with both silver and steel, which I won't get into now, but it's quite fascinating. This piece of plastic is taken in front of this Steve Silver facility. As a note, clear plastic is really rare in the wild, so this was quite the find. So one of my many first steps while leading up to my residency was to follow a snail. While I was living in California between homes in February and March of last year, the image of a snail presented itself to me while tending one of my dreams. My colleague Brandy reminded me that I was doing the spiral. I was living out of suitcases, searching for a home in Baltimore, my home on my back. And days later, I stumbled upon the Maryland State fossil shell, a Miocene age snail that went extinct 5 million years ago, the Aphora gardneri. A series of synchronicities that started with my dream snail led me from spiral to spiral to spiral, like this painting from local painter Joseph Cardell, to the sidewalk spiral on the same block as the BJC, to the spirals and snails being explored by the jewelers in my community, to the spiral of my cochlea while experiencing tinnitus. Even my new apartment in Baltimore felt like a spiral. And truly, spirals are always everywhere. Ferns, galaxies, flower, petal arrangements, whirlpools. The spiral is a shape of the order of the universe. Beyond snails and dream figures in my home, it felt like this project was also about noticing and re-expressing the order of the universe through my work. And all of a sudden, where there had previously been void, not knowing exactly what was happening next in this new life, there was a path. And actually, there were two paths. One was this inward facing, and one was outward facing. On the outward facing journey, I wanted to be in community and relate my work to its larger context and serve Baltimore and its people. And on the inward journey, I wanted to explore my relationship to my dream figures, my home, song, and sound, my emotions, and the shape of the spiral itself. It felt possible that the totality of this experience could unify all of my different practices. I was aiming for wholeness, and suddenly the residency wasn't just jewelry, it was in life. Experiment 1, gathering skills and tools for the journey. So now that I saw the shape of the path, it was time to prepare for the journey. The 3-month residency at the BJC comes with 2 complementary classes, and I wanted to strengthen my hinge making and waxwork and casting skills. So I took mechanisms with Andy and advanced waxwork and casting with Shayna. In Andy's class, I created this box. This is a dream drop. Every night at lights out, I whisper any open thought loops into it and close it. And the recycled plastic gem in the center neutralizes those thoughts so I can have sweet dreams. It's a meditation practice with an object. This is a close-up of the gem and the scraps of plastic that I used to make it. in Shayna's class, I deepened my wax carving skills and I learned how to turn wax vessels on the lathe to cast into bronze. So here is a little vessel. Then I made an important tool for my journey. This is a guide box and with a guidebook inside. I really wanted to stay on track and keep all of my practices organized. You know, I was building a new life and I needed some daily guidance. So I created this box and many versions of the book inside to guide me. So here is the final version of the book that is in the show now. It starts with a little prayer that I say to myself, some instructions for my day, some lovely affirmations. I've also put in, you know, some of the things that I should be focusing on while at the BJC, a nightly routine, some things to do when feeling anxious, some questions to ask myself, my priorities, hearth and home, and some of my dream figures and support figures that shepherd me along the process. Experiment 2, from fossil to fossil. So, you know, we have this amazing fossil, Maryland State fossil shell, and I had this fantasy of going to the Calvert Cliffs in Maryland where fossils are abundant and doing some fossil hunting. I love bringing wonders from the past to the surface. I've fossil hunted before and done some archaeological excavations, so I was really excited to maybe try this. It didn't end up happening, but I did visit the Natural History Society of Maryland to get up and close and personal with some Ekphora specimens, and I actually borrowed a few for my project. This is a large one on the left, and on the right is Julia Gardner, after whom the Gardnerae of Ekphora gardnerae is named. Julia Gardner was a famous Maryland-based USGS paleontologist and the first woman to formally enroll as a student at the Department of Geology at Johns Hopkins and received her PhD in 1911. As a quick note, the Ekphora gardnerae has been the Maryland State fossil shell since October 1st, 1994. So this fall, it will celebrate 30 years. So I took some of these borrowed Ekphora with me to the Baltimore Jewelry Center to prep them for mold making. And inside one of them, I found this other complete snail shell. I have yet to formally identify this specimen, but I do have plates from the USGS to refer to. But in the meantime, I've been thinking about it as a miniaturized moon snail fossil. Moon snails are also Miocene epoch, and they are actually still alive and well today. So this was my surprise treasure, a spiral within a spiral, a remnant of the past brought to the present. So I made silicone molds of various Ekphora fossils and injected them with wax to cast in bronze. What's funny, or maybe punny about this, is that in the world of fossils, there are molds and casts as well. Molds are fossils that are imprints or negative space left behind by organisms, and casts are when organic matter is replaced by minerals that then solidify. So here are some of the waxes of these shells. I really love the fidelity with which, you know, the details come through from the original shell. And here in the middle, you can see this large plane of red wax surrounding one of the shells. So sometimes when filling a mold with wax, wax can seep out the sides, and this is called flashing. And I thought it resembled kind of a fossil peeking out of the earth. So I decided to cast the whole piece as is to see what would happen. I love boxes and hinges, as I've mentioned, and I wanted to play with the surprise shell I found within the Ekphora. Also in Shane's advanced wax working class, I learned how to create hinges out of wax and cast them. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can make this happen. All right, let's see what these waxes yielded. So here on the left is again that actual large Ekphora, which I paired next to a teeny tiny one that is cast in bronze. On the left here, I played with cutting out negative space between the ribs of the shell. I was really taken with the idea of making the inside visible from the outside. And then on the right is the cast of the Ekphora that was caught within the flashing. And then, of course, I absolutely love my still improperly identified mini moon snail fossil and how it fits perfectly within the various curves of the Ekphora. But where I started with all of this, like what the actual desire was that I really wanted to recreate this fossil shell out of plastic. And I knew that fantasy was a healthy challenge because it's a very complex shape. It has all of these undercuts with the ribs. It doesn't allow it to be cast in a one-piece mold if made in plastic. And while I had a lot of ideas on how to approach this and problem solve, my overall residency project took on many different directions. And the reality of turning this fossil into plastic seemed really far away. And that was actually very disappointing to me. But then I remembered that I had been given a gift, a stepping stone, a simpler shape with which to experiment, my surprise shell. And here it is, the surprise shell made from plastic waste. This shell allowed me to track the journey of the fossils from deep within the earth into fossil fuels turned into plastic that I then transformed and returned into fossil form. I like to imagine that these organisms are dreaming their way back to one of their original forms, from fossil to fossil. Experiment 3, Charms for the City. Another experiment was my Charms for the City project. I was, within this city that I was getting to know, and of course I love research, so I was looking at lots of maps and trying to understand what Baltimore is all about. And of course I discovered that Baltimore was unfortunately the birthplace of redlining. This is a redlining map here on the left. And that as a consequence of that, and through the work of Dr. Lawrence Brown, I learned about the black butterfly and the white L. Here on this map from a 2020 census, you can see the unequal distribution of black versus white populations in Baltimore, creating this black butterfly effect. And I was also really interested, particularly in the Station North neighborhood. This little heart, I don't know if you could see it, but this heart in the middle here represents the exact point where the Baltimore Jewelry Center sits within Baltimore. It felt like a very special place for a number of reasons. On this map, it feels like a nexus, a potential. And it's a special place because it's also seen so many iterations. Of course, this is what used to be the ancestral homelands of the Susquehannock and Piscataway people. And then it became an industrial hub with the Cork, Crown and Seal Company. And then there was an unofficial Koreatown that started in the 60s. And then more recently, a series of neighborhoods, many of which I had colored in here upon my first research on this map. It was designated as one of the first, actually, the first arts and entertainment district in Baltimore in 2002. It's home to the MICA Art School, the Baltimore Design School. All right, and then I was curious because Baltimore is affectionately known as Charm City. And my residency at the BJC is a product of being charmed by Baltimore myself. And I was really tickled by this nickname because it actually speaks to two of my own magical practices, jewelry and song. So charms are magical jewelry objects. We know this. They attract luck and good fortune. But before charms were jewelry objects, they were songs. The Latin root of charm is carmen, which means song. And I discovered this because I have my own magical song practice where I sing myself into harmony and my desires into existence. So I was really interested in how this nickname came to be for Baltimore, Charm City. And I found this incredible article that described how it was a product of a 1974 ad campaign to boost the city's reputation as industry withered and white folks moved to the suburbs. And in the article, I came across the prolific Baltimorean artist Joyce J. Scott and the Baltimore Peace Movement co-founder Erica Bridgeford. And, Joyce Scott points out that this experience of charm was not for everyone. There's been a lot of disparity, inequity, and violence in this city. And so she says, of course, this is a charm city, but I see charm as multifarious, a giant, amorphous, ever-changing thing. It's really up to the people who are living in it, who are of it, to constantly redefine it. And for me, this was a call to make art. Okay, what do charms for the city look like? How can I, with community, revision what Charm City might be? How can I infuse the intention of the people into the jewelry? And Erica Bridgeford spoke to the resilience and beauty of the city. And so, with pieces of plastic trash that I collected, mostly from Station North, I invited community members to meditate on the plastic, infusing it with their wishes for themselves, for Baltimore, and for all beings. These bags in particular were meditated on by YouthWorks participants. They're teens that are hired by different organizations, in this case, the Baltimore Jewelry Center, over the summer. And this whole exercise, this creating of mantras of, they filled in the blanks with, may I be more selfish, assertive, peaceful, happy with myself. They filled in the blank, may Baltimore be more kind, peaceful, happy, and at peace. And may all beings be more caring, accepting, kind, happy, and with themselves and others. And so this whole practice was informed by Metta, which is a Buddhist loving kindness meditation that had really changed my own relationships and my life really a number of years ago. And it was also inspired by the work of a dear friend, Allison Strickland. So from the plastic, I created these Baltimore shaped charms, as well as their mirror image, so that our intentions can be reflected back to the city. Every year, the BJC hosts a symposium with free lectures and workshops around a theme. So I facilitated a workshop taking folks through the history of charms and Charm City with a series of maps that ended with custom mantra writing and a sound meditation. And here you can see the community members with their pieces of plastic. This is, and in this particular symposium, the theme was "This must be the place." So this was all about place. The symposiums always end with a community call to make jewelry. It's open to everyone. This is a close-up of one of the gems that was made from community meditated plastic. And this is the entire collection. This is the entire collection of the Baltimore Jewelry Center gems. We had also created a mantra specific to the BJC, so there are some wishes there. And I have all these gems now, and I was starting to think, well, how might I link these charms together? So I took inspiration from trains and the railroad system. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad is the oldest railroad in the United States. These are photos from the B&O Museum. And the Underground Railroad was also a very important system in Baltimore and Maryland, and of course the country. And Maryland is Harriet Tubman's birthplace. So on these trains, these structures right here are called cow catchers. They're supposed to push cattle out of the way. But they really captured my inspiration for a neck piece. And so I collaborated with community member Leah Musante, and they fabricated my charm catcher design with steel that we found, scrap steel in the studio. And it's designed to be able to house 6 charms, like a series of 6 charms. And here are 2. The piece and the entire gem collection was also part of the Baltimore Jewelry Center's community show that I had mentioned. This must be the place. And it was accompanied by a booklet mapping out which bags and which mantras went into which gems. So the symposium happened October 8th. And just for some context, on October 3rd, a few days before, the Morgan State campus experienced some gun violence. And Morgan State is Baltimore's largest local HBCU. And then on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel, eliciting retaliatory violence that continues today. So in this process, I was really contemplating peace and what does that mean? And I had the good fortune of running into Erica Bridgeford after a film screening, and she had invited me to do a meditation at the Baltimore Peace Movement weekend in November. And so as all of these things were swirling, I was thinking about how Baltimore itself is a historic site of violence, from colonial violence to being the first site of the first violence of the Civil War, to the murder of Freddie Gray and everything beyond and in between. And I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to, show up for the community and do what I could. And I started to feel my own inner peace slipping a little bit. And so it was an invitation for me to really ground myself in my own practices, which are sound meditation and song meditation. This is a photo from a youth peace walk where an intern and I got to represent the Baltimore Jewelry Center with a free workshop. And then this was the Baltimore, the Charms for the City, oops, pardon me, the Charms for the City Baltimore Peace Meditation during the Peace Movement weekend. So at this event, I was able to, walk people through, again, these different layers of history, as well as a peace sound meditation. And in this was kind of like the capstone community event of my residency. I had been learning, I'd used crystal singing bowls with my jewelry before. I learned how to charge my gold pieces with loving frequencies from my goldsmithing teacher, Savannah King. And I was graced with a friend and mentor, Jackie Cantwell's bowls as well. And I was in part of a sound leadership mentorship around this time and really developing my own sound practice. And so part of what emerged when I was leaning into my own inner peace practices was a song. And it was something I would sing daily to myself with my bowls. And I decided that for this capstone event, I would offer this charm, this song to Baltimore. This was, not just a jewelry charm for the city, but a song charm for the city. And here are a few gems that were created just from this piece plastic, all of the plastic that was infused with, may I be more peaceful, may I be at peace, may Baltimore be more peaceful, may Baltimore be at peace, may all things be more peaceful, may all things be at peace. And each of the pieces of plastic are quite special for their own reason. I would love to share all of them, but I won't. I'll share maybe two. This piece of plastic I found caught in a fence in Station North right before Artscape, which is the city's biggest arts festival last year. And this, what's beyond the fence, used to be an abandoned lot, but it was converted into a public gathering space and park. And to me, this piece of plastic captured the power of the arts and the role of Station North in particular to serve and build community through place. And this piece of plastic is also special to me because Erica Bridgeford, who co-founded the Baltimore Peace Movement, meditated peace on this piece of plastic. And before the meditation, as a group, we had a conversation about peace itself and peace in general and inner peace, and what does that look like and feel like to each of us. And the participant with this piece of plastic said that peace feels like steady waves. And we talked about how there's a lot of highs and lows in life, and that peace is not the absence of lows or conflict, but the ability to be with what is and the ability to tap into balance. These were the last two gems that I made in my residency because they literally broke the mold. All right, experiment 4, lighting by the way by romancing the home. So one experience that was completely brand new to me and I was really excited about was Everett's lamp making class. There was a lamp making workshop at the BJC. And I've been wanting to combine my work with light for a while. So I had all kinds of ideas, and I had a desire to create a 3-dimensional translucent shell. And that just felt complicated, and could I do it? But then in a flash, it came to me that the shell is my home. The spiral is my home. I will illuminate my home. And while I was looking for an apartment in Baltimore back in February and March of last year, it was a really challenging time. Of course, I was mourning a relationship, and really all I wanted was my own home. Over the past 20 years, I've moved 17, maybe 18 times, and I was kind of over it. And then, after writing love notes to and from my future home, I found an apartment number 6. And in the symbolic system of numerology, not something that I necessarily practice, but I love symbols, so I want to know everything about everything. Uh, According to numerology, a home with number 6 indicates harmony, beauty, artistic expression, balance, love, family, community, and financial freedom. Sounds pretty good, right? I'll take it. So I felt compelled to understand the shape of my space before moving in. All I had was a video tour because I was doing this remotely, and so I kept creating versions until I could take measurements to scale. And so this is a to scale model of my apartment floor plan with the Fibonacci sequence logarithmic spiral overlaid on top. And I noticed that the spiral started in the most public spaces, like the living room, and then it curled into the most private space, like the bedroom, closet. And the spiral itself seemed to swirl into infinity behind a tiny secret door I found in my closet upon moving in. So I wanted to use this shape in steel as a frame and create translucent sheets of plastic for the light to shine through in the negative space. Oh, even my spiral home is a lucky number 6. So when I first told my goldsmithing teacher, Savannah, about my spiraled home, she expressed a curiosity to see how my space corresponded to a Bagua map. It's a tool used to balance the flow of yin and yang energies in one's life through the arrangement of one's living space. So using both north as my entryway and an orienting factor, I found that the health center of my home, at the very center of my home, the heart of my home, was my kitchen. And this was not a surprise to me because I'd been noticing how my inner balance and peace and my artwork are healthiest when I spend time in my kitchen, caring for it and caring for myself by cooking myself homemade meals. In fact, one of the faces of my guidebook that I showed earlier has in bold, colorful letters, hearth and home. This was, a big focus for me in my process. And so this center is also associated with the color yellow. So I knew exactly which bag I was going to place at the center of this home. A neighborhood smiley bag. So a few times on my way to events, I would encounter this gray smiley bag. I've never seen a gray bag with a smiley face on it before, so it was very compelling, but every time I ran into it, I was on my way out and not prepared to take it with me. And I said, okay, I'll come back for you every time. And then when I went looking for it, it was nowhere to be found. Until a few nights later, my desire paired with some patience was rewarded, and I spotted it in this heap of recycling on the sidewalk. Turns out it wasn't gray at all, it just needed a good bath. Another special bag is this green one. This one was meditated on during the symposium by a fellow resident, Neve. This was my first time making translucent sheet. And any kind of sheet at all, actually. And of course, I chose to make something a foot tall. And I started to feel this like familiar pressure of timelines. I've always had an evolving relationship with time. But with this brand new life, so much of my energy going to this new focus, I really felt like the less time I felt I had, the more I tried to do. The later days I worked, the more days in a row I worked. And I kept learning this lesson over and over again. So,
yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna just mute. It's fine. Perfect, thanks. And so on a lunch break during the lamp making workshop, with this other resident, I decided to tap back in. I was going to go to my studio to work on this sheet and really try to like get it done. And you know, the workshop was only 3 days. I really wanted to have something to show for it. And at lunch, I was talking to my fellow resident, and they were sharing their ideas of their residency project and some ideas that they had felt previously unable or hesitant to fully explore with others out loud. It became clear that this lunch did not want to be quick. It wanted me to draw all of my consciousness back from my studio, where I was already kind of steps ahead, and just be in the here and now. And so I did. And we sat together, and I was able to tap back in and fully listen and take my time. And it's what we both really needed. So I knew that this piece of plastic had to be part of the lamp. I tapped back in to the snail. The snail says, go, but go slow. When external urgency strikes, when the urgency of clock time strikes, go even slower. And so this experience had brought the spiral nature of all of life to light. How it feels like I'm going down multiple spirals simultaneously, up, down, in, out, side to side, and that they don't all move at the same pace. The shape itself connotes movement. It implies both expansion and contraction, and it's infinite. But in between expansion and contraction is stillness. All right, so I decided to light my lamp with an incandescent bulb as a nod to the local Baltimore Mount Vernon Museum of Incandescent Lighting, which I've never visited because it's no longer open, but I know there's more there that I'll have to research. And I also like incandescent as its spectral power distribution most closely resembles natural light, particularly at sunset. All right, experiment 5. The whole. As above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul, from the Hermetica. So early in my residency, this image went viral of a yin yang comprised of quantum entangled photons, but it's not that the particles themselves make an image of the yin yang. It's just that it was an image constructed by scientists using quantum entangled photons. It's just an interference pattern. But this image captured the imagination of the world, many people falsely believing that this is what quantum entangled particles look like. And I was captured by it too. I'd been leaning into all kinds of different forms. And at this point, I really wanted to create my own spiral form, my own snail sea creature. My creature was going to be inspired by these forms. Again, a spiral, the highs and lows of waves coming into balance and resolving into a whole. And using sound frequencies here as the starting point of my form, I approximated the 990-degree spiral of the cochlea in the inner ear, and I transferred my shape onto a block of wax, cut it out, and started carving. I discovered that I love carving, hours in solitude, getting lost, following curves to their own resolution. This piece was truly my companion. It would come home with me each night, and it would absorb sound from my singing bowl each morning. And I had to set it down for a bit while the Charms for the City project took off, but once that completed, I picked it back up. And underneath, I carved the internal path of my descent into the psyche, unseen to all from the outside. I turned a teeny tiny sound bowl on the lathe and set it in the preparation chamber right here. So before taking the ramp out and then back down into the spiral, I start with sound as a centering practice. I imagined myself following the spiral all the way deep down into the very bottom. And then I realized that the very bottom of the inside is the very top of the outside. From the wax positive, I made a rubber mold, and mold making is actually inherently a union of opposites to make a third thing. From a positive, the wax, I made a negative, the mold, to make a new positive from plastic. I was going to cast the wax that I had carved into bronze and use it as a pusher for the plastic in the mold. So the wax and the bronze versions were just tools to make the version I dreamed of making in plastic. Ooh, and look, another lucky 6. So I sprued everything up. I had 3 flasks of objects to cast. One in the front here of a few shells in silver, then my Echphora fossils in bronze, and my personal companion, the snail, there in the back. And these flasks get filled with investment, which is a plaster-like material. Then the wax is burned out of them and molten metal fills its place. Again, a positive from a negative to a positive. But I had major problems with the investment. It was accelerating too quickly. See how bubbly it is? This is supposed to be smooth. And each one of my flasks had issues. And I've encountered issues like this kind of before. So the blessing is that I had zero expectations. At this point, maybe nothing would turn out, and that's just how it goes sometimes. But I really wanted to hold my companion snail in my hands. I was actually quite attached to that object. And on the morning of casting day, I woke up to a dream thought. The thought was, I am the wax. I've been crafting a life for myself, an identity, sculpting every facet and way of being. So let's see once again how the ideal of what I'm aiming for holds up when it's time to take its physical form. Will metal flow through all the way? Will it take its whole shape? So my first flask of silver shells did not come out. No, I mean, just pebbles. These are the pebbles of silver I fished out. The forms didn't cast. My second flask with my bronze exploras, as you saw earlier, did cast. There were a few air bubbles, but it was fine. And then it was time for my snail companion. During that casting, bronze shot through the bottom of the flask, okay? That was not supposed to happen. Normally, I'm supposed to get a beautiful button like this, right? This is where the excess bronze is. I can see everything has filled, perfect. But I got no button. This is kind of like black hole to nowhere. And this was the blob of bronze. And there was also some bronze sticking out of the bottom of the blob. So I said, okay, I guess that's it. So I set it aside. And it was one of those really beautiful snow days. So everyone in the studio went outside with some folks making snow angels in the parking lot, and some other friends started doing donuts in the parking lot. It was kind of bliss, this moment. And I closed my eyes and I said, I'm so excited. If the wax is me and the metal shot through the bottom and my cast failed, identity is an illusion. It's perfect. Back inside, I remembered that I had to clean my flask. And normally right after casting, once the metal has cooled a bit, the flask is dunked underwater and investment separates from the cast metal, and I can just like reach in and pick up the object. But I had let it sit there for so long, it was super hard. So I had to do some archaeology. And I knew there was still metal in the flask somewhere. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I was hoping for some curve or some part of the form to come through. So on the edge of my seat, I just was excavating. And there I was, digging for fossils. And something started to emerge. I kind of gasped to myself. And in the background, I could hear my colleagues. They were sampling new fragrances, which is kind of a new studio pastime. A fragrance called Haxan was sprayed on blotter and passed around, and I could hear the description of the scent being read as I dug. It read, in spite of its dense and dark notes, this is a surprisingly wearable and light concoction that takes you on a ride into the dark unknown of magic and ancient practices of the surreal considered heretic and profane. I listened and excavated and revealed and reveled in this moment that itself felt like magic. And then I pulled from the flask this otherworldly fossil looking like it had been rescued from the depths of the ocean. And cleaned it up, and all of it had cast. I mean, except for this little nugget here where you can see the inside as if it's been eroded by the sea. So I ran to my studio a few blocks away to melt some plastic bags and packaging, and I used the bronze as a pusher and made this. My companion now also has a companion, and the object was complete, a balance between negative and positive. Another negative and positive relationship is the interior and exterior spaces. The outsides are solid, but the inside is empty. And back when I was carving the wax, I was really curious about the shape of the inside. The spiral was, kind of deep and dark, and I wanted to understand its shape better. So, I was wondering, like, what would a positive of the interior of a negative space look like? What exterior could be left behind by the interior? And I wanted to make that interior exterior to show again what is inside from the outside. So I started taking impressions of the wax's negative space with clay. This one I took in the process of carving the wax. And then this one I took from the cast bronze. This is the final shape of the inside of the spiral. And I kind of love this reflection of descent as ascent. So I'll end this with a quote from contemporary alchemist Brian Cotnoir. He says that alchemy is the process of ascent through descent. You descend into the body, you descend into matter, and you come out the other side. Alchemy lives between two eternities, the upper infinite and the inner infinite. Okay, but it didn't really end there because I was still holding on to a fantasy that I could make a version of this into a nightlight, but I was cutting it pretty close. It was the final few days of my residency. Everything needed to be up on the wall by January 25th, and it was January 20th. Experiment 6, final illumination. So I asked myself, should I stop making things? Is it time to focus on the talk? So again, I turned to the snail and I slowed everything down. And I was able to really stretch out my last couple days in my residency, living like a snail. I leaned into prioritizing my curiosity and joy and slowness in my home. And then the next evening on the 21st, I opened the trash can at the BJC and I found these discarded pieces of clear plastic. Clear is essential and it's the main ingredient for creating translucence, something that can be lit. So in that moment, and you know how I mentioned it's hard, it's rare to find clear plastic in the wild. So I knew I had to try and make this light. And so I immediately also knew which two bags to include in the mix. A few days earlier, I found this incredible red bag in the snow on my walk home across the street from the BJC. I'd mostly put my plastic pickup missions on pause in the winter, but this contrast was so striking and the delight of a first snow was too great to pass it up. And I remembered that I also hadn't used this special one yet. Back towards the end of summer, there was this bag that I captured floating in front of the BJC like something out of American Beauty. And I also had this bag displayed on all of my community sound meditations, but it hadn't found its way into my work yet. And this was not my usual color palette, but I just went for it. And I made this. In dream tending, illumination is the name of a process for when a dream figure transforms beyond what it means on a day-to-day basis. It transcends particular meaning. And this is my final illumination. Okay, so I'm going to show you all a quick video of what the gallery at the BJC looks like. And after that, I'll be happy to take any questions or comments. So, my dream drop, the vessel turned from wax on the lathe. This was all part of Experiment 1, gathering tools and skills for the journey. My guidebook and its box. Experiment 2, charms for the city. These charms were the ones meditated and infused with peace. Lyrics for the song charm that I offered. Next experiment with the Ephora Gardneri, the actual fossil itself, with the bronze cast fossil. Shell, the inside, visible from the outside. The fossil that was cast with all of the flashing, kind of fossil peeking out from the earth. And our little surprise shells. in bronze, and in recycled plastic. The inside impression of the shell wax, and this complete object. Yet to be finished, but on its way. And the impression from the inside of the cast bronze. My home as a light, with that yellow plastic bag right in the center there, smiling face. And last, but most certainly not least, this little nightlight coming through at the very last moment of the residency. And there it is. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. It's been a joy to be able to share all of the work with you today. I'm really excited and super grateful for this experience.